The other and then like so all the project, you read one more project. Project, right? Really good younger parents.
Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight?
Good.
Wet, miserable, nasty. Fall time is coming. It's okay. Since you are coming in on long Saturday hours, I will probably give you next Monday off. Just because it's kind of that time and the switch and, you know, you're to do, but it just kind of works out well, that time period. Change these stupid masks. So it works out pretty well. Confirm that, and we'll do that. Let's see. There is a on Saturday the 26th. If you remember, there was that NHBA, the Home Builders event. You are certainly welcome to that. No obligation or requirement, but I just like to point that out. You are certainly welcome to, to go by and meet people, meet and greet, and all that kind of good stuff, and see what's out there in the industry. I will tell you that the day school, I guess, or at least the civil engineering construction guy, Greg Kelly, is starting an NHBA event, student chapter with competition. Okay, they have a competition. What's that mean for you? Well, a couple things. One, if you work in this during the daytime, you're probably going to win because you're probably pretty good. The other thing is that it's either at or, let's see, this year I think it's at Orlando, and then 2 years for the next two they do it at Las Vegas. So if nothing else, even if you lose, you're winning. You know what I mean? Like kind of cool. So, but there is a competition that's out there, and the day school students have been made aware of it. We met with them I believe it was last Tuesday, and told them about it. You are certainly invited, qualified, allowed to participate, and I will pass that on to him. Make sure that he gets your name or whatever if you are somewhat interested. Send me an email or something, and I can get you some more information about it and see when they're going to meet and all that kind of stuff. Thought he picked a day, but I can't remember what day he chose. But if he has to push it to the evenings or something, he's fine with that too. And it is good. It's really, really good to get into some of those networking opportunities, and again, do some competing against other schools. You start to, I think you will find, I'm sure you will find that you're pretty qualified for stuff. It's like, hey, we're pretty good. We're not like, don't be intimidated by some of the other schools, because I teach up at UC, and I will tell you they are absolutely no smarter than you are. Sometimes they just get a little bit a better break, or they get a different opportunity or something because of who they are, where they go to school at. They get better football tickets. But beyond that, you are every bit as qualified, and in some cases more so, if you are around this business at all. So just kind of keep encouraging in that area. Okay, what else is on my don't forget to tell the student list? I think that was most of it. Something will come up, I'm sure, later on. Okay, so for tonight, I had some stuff. Somebody sent me an email with a set of steps they actually did. I don't remember who that was, but that was pretty cool. They said, we actually built something like this last week or something. I'm like, wow, that's what we want to hear. Good stuff. There, that goes over there. I'm getting there. I'm getting down to the bottom. Okay. This. I got a couple of things that I want to start with or to work on tonight. And it's paper, unfortunately, or fortunately, I like paper. Good news. There you go. I got it. Henry, Mike Henry. The overhead projector, but hey. What I want to start looking a little bit of introductory stuff. Again, some of you around this stuff a little bit, others are not. So I'd like to get everybody there because it's came to school for. So we want to introduce this. This is a packet of some building plans and a site plan, actually done, I don't know, several years ago now, 2016. So it was done several years ago. An actual job that I worked on for some people. And it's a nice little introduction thing. This is residential. Here, after we go through this and we get a break, we're going to look at a commercial job a little bit. For right now, we just want to kind of start here. And I don't expect to know everything on these papers. In fact, let me do this only because look at it for about 5 minutes while I go make this into small form. I'm going to go print this smaller so that it fits on the overhead projector better. Otherwise, I'm going to be sliding that thing all night long. I don't want to do that. Just kind of look at it. This works a little better for. Okay, so what you have is a pack of plans for a home that was actually built, like I said, 2016 or something like that. And my job was to actually do the site and to do the surveying, the stakeout work. So that's what I put on the front page because this is kind of my world. And then the next several pages are the actual building plans. I think they were finally, I think those were final and what they actually built. So there are a million things that we could talk about on here, and we're not going to, but CET 105, or excuse me, SUR 105 is where they typically get into the site plan and some basic surveying stuff. I'll just point out a couple of things. You can kind of see that the house is sort of laid out. See the perimeter of it, the outline of the thing, and some of the things called setbacks happen to be in what is it, Madeira, I believe it is, and or Madisonville. I got one of those places out there, and they've got some screwy setback requirements. They actually to the overhang. They actually measure to the gutter line, where the rest of the world actually measures to the foundation line. So in that case, I probably, because I think that's kind of a dumb rule. Not that I don't understand what they're saying, but I just don't necessarily, it's just not typically done that way anywhere else. So they actually have a gutter line dimension setback, front side, and I guess I did probably rear just to be kind of snotty about it. But most of the time you're looking at the actual foundation, the outside of the foundation. You can see the driveway. We can see where the there's the main. That's usually a pretty important thing out in or near street curb, out in the right of way. Talks about the slope, and then there are a lot of requirements to make this thing work as far as how much slope you can have from your basement if you've got finished with the toilet down there. How much slope the sewer reach, slope garage level first. Builders work to the top of the foundation level because it makes a lot of sense. That's what they're pouring. So once they get that level established, the building goes up above it or whatever. Basement finished floor, which is the concrete, and then second floor is probably less important, but they put that on there. All right, so this thing's got fuzz in it, and I'm bugging me. Bad. So once we got the foundation, we got the elevation. Those are typically what surveyors do. They kind of establish that. Now we work with the builder and say, what do you think? Where would you like to have this or whatnot? But we kind of, the surveying side, typically gets to choose this and make that decision for a lot of reasons. Like one simple thing is if possible, you want your driveway to drain out to the street when it rains. You don't want the water to run back into the house. Again, not that it can't, but it really shouldn't. You'll notice between the garage and the first floor, there is from 778, 778, 67, there is 0.67 feet of rise. Let's do this, just because it's a good exercise. If you got a calculator or a cheap cell phone, it'll probably do this. Almost everything on the surveying engineering side works in decimal feet. We always work in decimal feet because of a calculator. It's just easy. However, we have to recognize that the builders are working in feet and inches. It's this kind of common practice. It's how the world is, at least our world. And we got to be able to interact with that. So if we want to do this convert, obviously, we've got to do some multiplication. And we know then that 1 foot is 12 inches. The 1 inches. So we can multiplication like this. This little conversion mechanism works really, really well in a lot of civil engineering, a lot of technical and the trades. you'll notice that put feet on the bottom to cancel feet on the top. That's kind of a big deal, kind of a big concept. 12 inches is a foot, the same thing. Technically, mathematically, all I am doing is multiplying by 1. That's the same unit. So, long story short, if you take points, multiply 12, come up with a little over 8. This is actually 0.667. But either way, you're going to come up with 8 inches. And that's just kind of a standard step size. We talked about steps. Kind of a standard stair size to go from the garage to the first floor. Same question. Why would we not put it at the same elevation? Why would we not just make the whole garage slab and the first floor all the same elevation?
For drainage purposes.
Okay. Draining what? That's correct. Draining what?
Water.
More important than gasoline or whatever comes out of the bottom of your car. So there is actually a code that says you have to have, I think, 4 inches of difference between the garage slab minimum and the first floor. And that is, again, on purpose. It is just to make that drain away. In fact, we were to look a little closer at the code, and this is for the architects in the CET 130, but it's also for the builders who have to enforce the code. If we've got a finished floor slab, I'll find a pen that works. We have a finished floor slab. Thinking about details, this is where my sketching stuff came in from last time. Okay, so we start thinking about details. It's a little more complicated to actually impose that. Well, 8 inches sounds like a great idea. Actually, it's a little more complicated because the floor system is made up generally of 3/4 inch plywood. The top of the foundation here at this garage slab, the slab would be in here. Okay, we got to come up with some number in here. But we've got a 2x material, 2x4, 2x6, 2x8. We talked about that. That is going to sit on top of that. We also have a sill plate. See, where do you get all this detail from? Well, when you look in these building plans here in a few minutes, I'm going to show you some of this stuff. But there's going to be a sill plate to this, and of course, this sill plate is bolted down through and onto the. So in order to get that 8 inches, we'd have to kind of think real hard to make that in there. Now the rest of our floor system might be 8s, 10s, 12s, we don't know. But that last little one might have to be either special cut or have to take something that's normal, or we might have to try to stop our concrete at a certain elevation. Kind of where I'm getting you to think about all of this is that sometimes something as simple as this really needs a little bit of thought. The folks that in job trailers, they're trying to build this house. They're making these little sketches and trying to figure out what number, how big size something be to accomplish the design. Now, with a better idea, they say, hey, George, can we make this 8.5 inches? That'll work really well for us. Or builder or somebody, I'd have to say no, because it's outside of code. So, oh, that's right. Code only allows 8 inches. I can't have 8.5. Okay, then how about if we put in 2 steps that come out and go down? And we might say, that's fine, you can do that. And then, again, they're thinking through those details. I don't want to get lost in that on this first day of this kind of stuff, but I do want to kind of keep putting that in front of you, that a lot of this sketching and there's really thinking, really kind of why we're pushing it, because it allows you to think about those details. Something as kind of small as that becomes pretty important. Whoever just came in, there's a set of plans up here. I'll leave a couple of them over here about the sanitation devices. Okay, I think I'm done with the first page there. Oh, the other thing I'd probably point out is these little dashed lines that sort of meander through there. Anybody know what those are called? What those are? Starts with the letter C. Okay, those are called contour lines. A contour is there's really not a line out on the yard. Doesn't really, show up as something like a painted stripe or anything. But what it's used for symbolically is that it is the elevation of the ground. It is so if for some miraculous reason it were to flood to 776 feet above sea level, that's not even the correct term, but I'll use it for today, then the water would flood is out above the water. But what it does imply is that if you were to walk along that dash 7 on uphill at all, you are going, and that bubble should stay level all the way around here. Now, if you start to go this way, you can begin to see where the water drains. Contour or of water flow. In fact, water is going to flow. I didn't do a great job of making that a right angle. There was an existing house. This is a little unusual, a couple of existing houses. And we had a low spot in the front yard or right at the street. So the idea was we had to start thinking about how in the heck to the low spot. And up here, I just sort of took it and cut before it got to the driveway. Thinking about water is important. Here's why. Water is the #1 problem and callback on every home. Period. It comes into the roof, it comes in the floor, it comes in the back, sidewalk, drains down the backyard, water everywhere. Water from products. Why it's hard to deal with is because we don't build while it's raining. If we built when it's raining, we'd see where the water problems are. But by the time we get there, all we see is a little bit of mud, maybe even have a water problem. But reality is, it is the #1 problem. Demolish a home, R-A-Z-E-D, just a word. A home, R-A-Z-E-D, just a word. But it was removed, so they tore out a house and put in a new house. It was removed, so they tore out a house and put in a new house. Pretty common in the market these days. So when I get the job, it looks a little. When I get the job, I get a set of plans that look a little bit like this. And again, this is from my friend Greg Ruther out of Full House, or the AIB guy. Again, it's not a stamped set of plans. Wasn't done by an engineer or architect, done by somebody who knows what the heck they're doing. It was an engineer or architect. Architect, is that a word? Now, the little details in the first page, they're on there. Again, that's just by another designer, and they like to have a cover page. They like to have the first page kind of just real nice and sort of appealing, and then they kind of get into detail stuff. Everybody does things a little bit different. And when you're in a hurry, like, oh, I got to find a place to put this little detail on here. And that's where this stuff winds up. I will point out, just kind of real quick, post and detail on the front porch. I don't know that they had a deck detail. I have to. You'll notice in the somewhere on the front page, it's going to be a sheet index. Right? So we're kind of talking about reading building plans here, but finding what page something's on is kind of important. Now, for this, there's only, six pages or something like that, 5 pages in the site plan or whatever. But when you see this set of commercial plans that I got here coming up, it's a big deal. It's like you start getting a small book and you're trying to find out where some detail might be. So going to your sheet index is pretty important. And usually they're organized in the commercial job, they're going to be organized in a particular fashion. Again, residential, kind of put them all, the 5 of them on there. It does go over some of the criteria, building footages and that kind of stuff, square footages and sizes. It gives me just some basic notes. Gives you a pic, and again, mine's not as good as yours. It kind of gives you a picture of what this thing might look like when it's done. Is it made out of brick? Is it made out of vinyl, sided? On the roof, what does 6 and 412 and 10, what does all that mean? Which one's which?
The rise.
Yeah, rise and run.
So this is also.
Yeah. So rise is run as well. It's almost always rise over run. And slope again comes into play. So if it goes up 6 inches, goes over 12 inches, goes up 6 feet, it goes over 12 feet, as long as the units are saying how much up, how much over. Is that steep? Is 612 steep? I'm not climbing on it, because I wouldn't climb one of 212 that's more than this high, because I don't like being up high. I don't like being as tall as I am. But that's walkable. It's not fun walkable, but it's walkable. You'll feel it. Okay. Go to the next page. I'm on sheet 2 of 5. Lower right-hand corner, you should see the sheet number. So here, where Greg elected to show the side and the rear elevation. Again, nothing real fancy here. This is pretty straightforward little building. It wasn't particularly exciting, but it did the job. Some people start to notice some things now on the rear. It's not quite so bad, but particularly a front elevation. If your windows sort of look skewed, you got a big one and a little one, and those kinds of things. It really starts to determine curb appeal. So your front elevation is kind of a big deal. The other ones, not much, but I'm kind of a critic most of the time, and I just like to see a little bit more uniformity or whatever, but it just kind of depends upon how the house plan goes. The roof plan is always a trick, an extremely difficult roof. Some of them get to be quite complicated. I mean, like really complicated. What happens is you send a set of plans to a truss manufacturer, and they make sort of their own set of plans. They will make each individual truss, or we'll call it roof truss. They'll make each of their own individual roof trusses, and then a lot of times they will just simply number them, and you got to pick them out of the pile and make sure that they match, and hopefully they go to next one, and the roof kind of starts to continue out like it's supposed to. But you do have to kind of watch for that. They will have their own roof plan. That is engineered, and the company that supplies the roof trusses will have an engineer on staff that actually will stamp that set of drawings. Now, the construction manager in that case has to do a couple things. One, make sure that those roof trusses don't get beat up and battered while they're laying there for a couple of days. 'Cause that's no good. If they start breaking, they go get new ones and you just can't like glue them back together. And they're pretty flimsy, quite frankly. Especially the big ones. They can be kind of wiggly and wavy and kind of flimsy. They're good in the vertical direction, but side to side, not so much. The other thing you have to do is make sure that you get that sealed set of documents from the truss manufacturer. So again, you're sort of a paper mache factory. You're taking care of paper. The building inspector comes out while you're setting the roof trusses. And they say, "Let me see engineer truss plans." You show it to them, and it's got a seal and a signature on it. And usually they're okay, and then they kind of wave it on. All right. Turn sideways here. What happened? There I am. Okay, so again, you're sort of taking care of that. Now, there's a lot of general notes up here. Some of them are probably less important than others. You're going to have a tough time reading them, so am I. But they're up there. Same thing with energy efficiency. These are pretty just cut and paste. They're going to tell you put R30 in the roof and R11 in the walls, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty standard construction. Now, if you watch enough YouTube videos of certain builders, they will begin to show you some details of while you might meet the code, you still got some issues. In other words, there's still some places that if you don't put the insulation in well, or the insulation company doesn't put it in well, they sort of slap it in there. It's not real efficient. Some things happen, some negative stuff happens, things aren't sealed up correctly. So it's not so much the quality work. The idea is that it meets minimum standards, but really the name that goes on there, your name, deals with the quality. Some people want it right, and some people want it right now. So, some of this is philosophy. If I were to talk ethics right now, this is kind of a separate topic to that. How good of a job do you do? Well, I'm going to do a great job. Man, I'm going to do a phenomenal job. I want to do almost a perfect job. Great. Are you going to charge them for it? Are they going to pay for it? Are you willing to accept less to get done? Will some crap happen? It starts raining. You got to hurry up. Another job is coming in. Something's going on. There's a million excuses, right? There's always something to deal with that. So while we talk about ethics, this is kind of a good introduction place to talk about ethics in construction, just sort of as a start, because it's like you have to make these decisions now before you even start the jobs. And when you're into them, you sometimes still have to make those decisions. It's some gut-wrenching things that you got to think about early on rather than react to later. So I'm just putting that as a little seed in your head. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Anyway, let's get back to our plan at hand. So here we have a foundation plan. They also had a finished basement. So this makes sense to put them together. When I go to do my work for the site plan, the foundation plan is where I go to. I want to know the outside dimensions of the building. When I go to this house in the on the lot, I want to know the actual outside dimensions of this building, and that the excavator and the foundation people work off of. Once the foundation, I'm done. I mean, once the foundation started, I'm done. The only thing that I may do is occasionally the actors, particularly the foundation people, they'll sort of pour a footer coming around sort of the outside, and it's pretty sloppy and kind of big. Sometimes it's like, this much in a trench. Sometimes they just trench it and fill it with concrete. Sometimes they actually form it and pour it. Again, that's a construction method. With some excavators, some companies, they like to just dig a hole. And they'll generally buy material. And they'll form up and pour with concrete. So they'll sort of do stake it or whatever. So they'll form and pour their footers. This way. They form and pour footers. And then after the gravel and the paint and all that other stuff, it goes back in there. Some decide, let's just go for it here. And we'll take and actually maybe trench and then just slop fill where the foundation, where the footings go. Okay, so there's little different approaches to this. Some pros and cons to all of it. Anyway, sometimes they will ask me to pin the footers. The surveyor, they will ask me to pin the, and what that literally means, I will go and drive a kind of a concrete nail in the still relatively soft concrete at exactly the corners. I actually put those in there. That way, when the foundation crew comes back, they'll take the forms and they will literally, if I've got a nail in here, really put foundation form work right up to that nail from over 8 or 12 or whatever the foundation wall is. But they'll put that foundation right on there, snap a chalk line, keep it straight, that kind of stuff, and they'll work. That's what they call pinning the footers or pinning the foundation. Again, some do, some don't. Sometimes they just want me to get it in the hole. Go for it. Build it yourself. And they'll just use the dimensions that are here, and they'll make sure that it's at that. Sometimes they get it out of square. I have seen that probably too many times. You get a building a couple of inches out of square, you don't see it. You start laying that plywood down, and all of a sudden, the foundation and the plywood is coming in half on this side. Cut it off, and then it doesn't fit. The house is, you start laying carpet and it doesn't fit. They go down. I've seen that too many times. So, you know, a square edge is kind of a handy thing to have on home to make it work right. So that's another reason why sometimes they will hire me to pin the foundations just to keep it all together. Because you can still have a dimension of, 48 by 36, but it could be, not at a 90-degree angle. It's time for a math question. What is that overall dimension? 37, 4, 34, 37. Let's do this. I like math. So will you concur that back wall is how wide? How long? Okay, 37 overall. 30 is the overall. Notice that dimension here. (34 feet 0). Now I have to make it here. Let's just do this. I'm going to remind myself your first semester students. Okay. How long is that wall? 46 nothing. That line 46 feet 0 in. Correct. Now, as I implied there a minute ago, it is entirely possible to have those two dimensions and not have. One technique was confirmed square, if I can get that sort of going across there like I want it to go. A little out of practice in the last couple of years here. I like that. One technique is to find Dr. Pythagoras, he wasn't a doctor, use the Pythagorean theorem and tell me what this distance should be. We did this in math, I remember, a squared, yeah, that's the feller. So if we're going to find c by itself, what do we got to do? Take the square root of both sides. So c, this length, hypotenuse, should be a squared plus b squared. Add it together, take the square root. I got a calculator. According to this, if I take 34 and square it, 46 and square it, well, it starts with 46 and square it, 34 and square it, square root, good. Something neat happens. I wanted that to happen. Unless you tell me what number you get, which number do you get? Here. 5721. What'd you guys get?
7.20.
Is there one more decimal in there? 208 or 201?
Yeah, 1.
201?
Yeah.
Okay. 57.201 what?
Sir.
No, I'm just kidding. That's an old military joke. Feet. Okay, so it's 57.201 feet. Great. Went to Home Depot, bought tape, and it was in feet and inches, not feet and decimals. All right. Now, in my truck, I keep feet and decimal tape because everything I do is in decimal. But y'all don't have that benefit. So I don't know if you remember this from last week, or I think we talked about it. How many inches is that? How would we convert that back to inches? .201. What if it was 0.5 feet? How many inches would it be? It was a half a foot. It was 0.5 feet. How many inches would it be? 6. We all know that. What did we do mathematically? And I got my eyes closed because I'm thinking in my head. What did we do mathematically? We went from 0.5 to get 6. We multiplied what? We multiplied the decimal by 12. Okay, so that thinking process that I kind of was messing around with you there is really what I do. I think this stuff through. I use sometimes examples when I don't know something. I'll look at something I do know and then apply the same technique. So long story short here is if we take the decimal and multiply it by 12, now, buddy here's got the calculator so I can, no, keep doing it. What's the number? Take 0.201 times 12. I trust you.
2.412.
2.412. Anybody else get that? Yes, good. All right, so that's in inches. So far, we've got 57 feet. The little dash is not a negative or subtraction, it's just a separator. 57 feet to, now, how are we going to convert this of a fraction that we use? How close are we operating? How close are we working on our job site? Half, 8, quarter, 16?
16.
8. That's always 16. Just make it an 8. You work 16 and I work 8. All right, so we're going to take the decimal portion, 0.412, multiply that by 8. If you want to work in 16s, go ahead. Multiply it by 16. It doesn't make a difference. So 0.4 times 8, 3, a little over 3. 3.2 plus 3. So this is just round to the nearest whole number here. So what this tells me then is that I now have 3 after the 2. 3 what? 3/8 of an inch. 3/8. And you either got 6/16 or maybe 5/16, I don't know. All right. So now we've used our head and a relatively cheap calculator, and we can pull the tape. It had better be 57 feet 2 and 3/8 inches. And if it's not, you're out of square. Okay. If not, you're out of square. If you get it too big, you got it out of square this way. If it's too small, you're this way. You got to make adjustment then on something to square it back up and to get it square. There should be 57 feet 2 and 3/8 within a double, an eighth or something like that to make that work. Right. I will tell you, there are a lot of carpenters in this business that do not know how to do that. You are smarter than them right now. There are a lot of people in the industry that cannot do that. They are okay if we were to square something off. Have to blank that screw. A lot of them are okay and know enough to measure across the diagonals. And as long as the two dimensions are the same dimension, as long as they get the same number, it doesn't matter. That's true. If you get a different dimension, if you measure across your diagonals, one of them is going to be shorter, and one of them is going to be a lot longer. And you're going to say, oh, it's not square. Okay, so they know enough to measure across the diagonals and get the same number, but none of them can do Pythagorean theorem. And I will tell you, there's a whole lot less of them, like not nearly as many, that can convert that from a decimal into a fraction. A fraction that we can use, like 2 and 3/8 inches, or 2 and 5/16 inches, or anything like that. I will also tell you that if you've got an app, if I was going into construction, and I do this occasionally, I put an app on the front to do feet and inches, feet and decimals, do that conversion. It's just pretty necessary all the time. All right. Well, that was fun. Oh, boy. I'll not say that. I'll put it there. Here in the garage area, it says unexcavated. What the heck does that mean? Any idea?
This slab above.
Yeah, or I guess if you think the direction, it's still part of the foundation. This is deep. This is shallow slab nearly on grade for the garage area. So this wall is a deep wall. This wall is a deep wall. So it's shallow on top. Here, I'll go to pictures in a minute. This happens in Cincinnati all the time. So. So the word unexcavated means that we're not digging a basement underneath the garage. Well, how does that impact us? Well, a couple of things have to happen here. I'm going to put the other side up real quick. in order to build that separation, this basement wall, the excavator is going to dig a hole. They might dig a trench here. They may just come back a little bit. Usually, they know what they're doing. You're going to come back close to the slab. They're not going to try to. You never want to move dirt twice. You want to not move it at all if it's natural condition that you're going to be driving on. Now we got a different situation because remember there was a house here already and that was demolished. That's different. Let's just assume a regular vacant lot. Okay, so they're going to try to keep that fairly shallow so that you can just put a little bit of sand, maybe a little bit of leveling and a little bit of gravel or some grit or something and then pour that slab. That's good. That's all good. This is a shallow kind of usually dug with a backhoe, excavator, something small. Now this dude, in order to build that, depends on whether we form it or not. We have to leave some space back here. At least enough to put the forms in. And kind of tie that off maybe a little bit. So we got to put forms in and build that footer at the bottom. Now this is where it gets a little dangerous, OSHA people, because sometimes you got 7 to 8 feet of pretty close to vertical dirt right there. Sometimes that's not the most stable stuff. Now it's not going to encapsulate you or come over and crush you. It might knock you over a little bit. You'll be mad, but it's probably not going to kill you dead. It's not like it's a narrow trench that's going to cave in on you. That's the danger stuff. But we do have to excavate this. So now we get this void space back here. We still got to get the formwork. What happens is you usually have a pretty good void back here, and you start to fill this in. So we pull the forms like the next. Give it 1 day. This concrete's still pretty green. It's not cured. Notice I didn't say the word dry. Okay, the word is cured. This concrete isn't cured. Dry. It's still starting to set up, but it takes, believe it or not, it takes 28 days just to hit like sort of a baseline solid, baseline good quality. After about 3 days, it's probably about 70%, 80% of that 28-day strength. So it's still pretty fresh. It's still pretty soft, relatively. So, but we're trying to get on with business here. A lot of times the builders will pretty quickly try to backfill that thing. And whenever you start to press down on this thing, you start or anything like that. But a lot of times you start to see some cracks develop and such on those really long walls from that backfill because your machinery is going across it. You're trying to backfill it. It's kind of pressing it out and all that kind of stuff. So, and really the same thing happens on this side, but this seems to be a little bit worse because the garage is, you got the car loads coming in all the time, whatever. That you start to see that more as this soil or whatever. So again, not part of the class, but something to throw at your head just to get you to think about some of these details. Kind of important. Let me press through the rest of this thing here and we can get into something else. Now, we'll take a break and get into something else. Okay, so on page 4, so now on page 4, we're kind of to the fun stuff here, I suppose. This is where residents want to know what's going on. They like their basement, but they really want to know what's going on the main floor. So now we have the floor plan. We're looking at it from from above. So we have a floor plan, and this is where you see your general layout. You see, all the rooms. There's the garage. We see the steps. We see the great room. See the kitchen. We see the dining area. We start to see the main rooms kind of develop here a little bit, and we feel the flow of it. Hopefully the dimensions kind of work out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And then we see the second floor, again, same thing. And Greg's elected to put both the floors on the same page because it fits pretty well. And it's nice to kind of see how things overlay. Here's what I mean. It's nice floor, but interestingly enough, Greg's got this big bathroom stuff going on over here. On the second floor, with master bath, we got a couple of lavatories, we got that big fancy dancy tub, we got a toilet, we got a shower. Okay, so we got all that stuff there. And on top of that big dining room area. We don't get back to plumbing until we get to the kitchen down here. Okay, so sometimes it's not stuff line up, sometimes it doesn't. Well, what do you do? I don't know. This is where the designer kicks in. And the detail range might be proper. So we've got our floor joist. We've got our wall system, our outside walls. 2x4, probably maybe 2x6 construction. Maybe ridge and walls. This is sitting on the floor or a bath up here. This is all the fancy bath stuff. So we got a toilet. That's good, fine. Nice little toilet. Well, underneath the toilet's got to be a pipe. And depending upon the lavatory and some of those other conditions, you know, sometimes they go to the wall. Like they almost always go into the wall. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Why is this pipe in the sink? In the left, it depends on what part of the town you come from. Why has it got that little gooseneck?
Catch gases.
P-trap. I'm calling it J-trap. So the idea here is that this stays filled with water. And then again, this goes into the wall, which goes into a pipe where it goes down. So if it weren't for this trap, the fumes that come out of a sewer, they stay. And they could make their way back through here. And if there were no water, or if this was just square, it could make its way and come into the sink area. And it could be kind of smelly, be kind of almost noxious. It's like, oh, this is no good at all. It smells bad, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so the trap is for that purpose. It goes through the roof. What's that called? Okay, called a vent. What's its purpose? Twofold, I guess, actually. Reason. You may know what that reason would be. Okay. Have you ever taken a hose filled with water? You guys got to try this. I'm at the west side. We used to have the site and stuff all the time. Gasoline, and neighbors, switch, fish tanks, all kinds of fun stuff. So you take a hose and you fill water, put one end in the liquid, and then but the hose is doing this. It's coming up over the top of it, and you let go, and the water starts to drain, and it keeps draining. And it keeps draining, and it keeps draining, and it keeps draining, and it keeps draining. You the gas can or the fish tank or whatever it is. So it's called siphoning. So if I've got an aquarium sitting up on top of the tank here. If I take this hose, and I take both ends and stick it, and then let go, this water will siphon itself out. It will literally climb up and over, even though it's down here. It will climb up and over and then come out. To have the stopper, you pull all this water sort of goes in here. It sort of creates like I'll call it a plug of water. It creates like a plug of water, and it siphons this thing dry. And if it weren't for a break right here, an air break, literally a hole, equalize the atmosphere, it would drain that thing dry, and then you're back to the stinky fumes coming in. Take a soda straw in a cup and poke a little hole right there. Just poke a little hole right there. You could not suck out anything. It will not work. It's called a vacuum break. So sometimes it's fun. We used to do this to people we didn't care for a whole lot. We take and poke a little hole in their straw and they couldn't get anything out of it. Right? It's just a little simple vacuum break. So code, the building code, the plumbing code requires that you have this vent in here so that the P trap doesn't go dry and then the fumes could make their way back in to the living space. All right, that's not what I wanted to talk about. Let me get back to this at hand. I've got a toilet and it's got a big pipe in it. Now, I don't know which way that one back there, we got one pipe outside, but we also got a plumbing chase. We got plumbing chase, but we got plumbing outside the plumbing chase. Oh, well, it's maybe a column. Okay, so maybe it's not a plumbing chase. And sometimes you'll see stuff that looks like this, the plumbing chase, and the pipes are actually outside of it and stuff, so they just box them in. Well, that's nice, except in your dining room, you may not want that because some of the furniture doesn't fit. I don't know. I'm not a house designer too much. So I will assume then that they want to bring this, and then we take it down into the basement where it, eventually goes out. Dining room. So we have to hit the joist space. Well, as long as the joists are going this way, you can get here. Sometimes they take it into the next joist space. Just maybe the way it has to sit, maybe the way it has to fit in there. There's 100 reasons. I said all that to say this. Sometimes plumbers will just simply notch out that joist and run that pipe. I bet you've seen that more than once. They will notch out that joist. How do they do that? They got a sawzall. Man, they notch that thing, it'll go like a hot knife through butter. So they just notch that joist out and run that pipe through there. And now you can run it if you want, and away you go. What do you think the structural ability of that joist? You destroyed it. All your loads coming across here, especially the sitting down load, right? So all those loads coming across here, this thing wants to fail right there. So sometimes they make me come back as an engineer and come up with some sort of a system. Generally, it's like some sort of a strap or something on the bottom, steel or something that holds that thing in. But it's a pain in the rear end, and it's still got the drywall. It's just sometimes a mess. All right. So notch or joist is a big deal. There are a lot of people that work in the industry that don't know that. They know that, but they don't care for that. Two more things, and then we're taking a break. Might be on the last page. Should be near the last page. 2, 3, 4, 5. Here it is. So here, typical wall section shows everything from the footer and the steel, some of the foundation steel. We start to see the joist. We see the sill plate. We see the insulation. We see that it's not brick in this case, that it's a vinyl sided house. It's got some sort of a cladding on it. We see the second floor, we see trusses start to tie. Sometimes they take it just through like the basement or through the sections, and they typically, again, just sort of cut and paste those in. So they'll have one for brick and they'll have one for siding. They'll have one where this is a typical panel height. All 2x4s are 8 feet long. Another little detail. All right, something to think about. We've got a sill plate at the top. We've got a stud, a sill plate at the bottom, got a sill plate at the top, sometimes two, like in this case. We'll have a stud that's in here, in between them. And we say, so we got it for panel height. What's the panel height? This one I look a little tighter to see. We have a panel height of 9, 1, and 8. Unusual. And upstairs is 8 feet, 1 and then 8. You think drywall first or the wall drywall first? You made that exactly 8 feet of stud from stud to stud, and you got this 8-foot drywall, 8 feet of drywall, and it's a little, and it does fit, and it starts to snap, so they leave a little bit of extra. Some people only leave a half inch, some leave an inch and a half, but they leave a little bit of extra because the bottom is going to be covered over the runner, the molding or whatever at the bottom. So they often will take the further top of the ceiling, will put that in, there's a half inch. They'll take the next piece on the wall, they'll kind of butt that up against there. That's at 8 feet 0. That's what length that is. We don't have to cut the drywall. That's good news. A little bit of space at the bottom, it sort of maneuvers itself in there. And we got enough room to make it fit pretty quickly, sort of as a tip up and make it go. Little details, details, details. So this last page is a bunch of details. Talks about treads and stairs and runners and risers and all that kind of good stuff that we talked about last week. All right, so we've gone through 5 pages of a house plan. Let's take a break, come back at 7:30, and we're gonna look at another one, and I'm gonna have you do a little exercise for me.
Man, actually, like 11 miles trying to get from Kentucky to Ohio.
Oh, you were over there?
Highland Heights.
I was thinking from my other.
Oh.
I got it. Work on the what?
Yeah, a lot of work.
For that,
You know, like anytime. Last week, and because like, and don't do this. Well, yesterday, what happened? But this is, I had to, but I had to take these one time.
up here tomorrow. Too busy.
So you didn't even.
Drop it from class.
Today?
One of my classes just dropped. Just for a while.
But the only thing we have is
I'll ask some kind of stuff. Because it was all online. I got some nationals in fact. So, I didn't know, Bill, I had people on teaching consultant. Cabinet, that's the nationals. It was all virtual, like if normally it's like you travel, like you get to like, move in at Atlanta, nationals with it. Virtual, so like, how do they judge you? Like competition fairly to compete. So like, they have like a judge there. You just think it's what I didn't mind that, but I did sit there for us, we know that. And I sent it in twice, and it's really good, so I don't send it. When I was in my office, it was about like 10 points. Yeah. He was like, as a plumber, electrician, 2 grades, he built like a top house. It's like 8 feet by 8 feet. Franklin's coming in frame. I guess the plumbers. I don't know if that's what it is.
Just like 1,000 on a pair of shoes. That's like revenue. I was just in my room the other day, and I was like, dude, I want these big bags. I'm like, current month ago, I was like, all my friends are very funny. Dude, let's come with me.
Yeah, did you, so I can. Once, no one else in my class made competitions. So I think it's, the playing competition, I was first. I did jobs. They told me to go to national.
Oh, this is.
I got paid, 'cause I was supposed to get,
Oh, this is.
I wanted to say, I was supposed to get
But you
$5,000.
actually.
Well, it's possible. So when I went state, I got paid. That's why I was like, you know, I don't know. Nationals, we got to, and also, the water. Yeah, so I was stoked, like, I stayed in on the out. I'm curious,
Oh, because that's how you look like. I'm a fair.
last time, I was, you actually. That's what I found out about the whole conversation. That was a big plus, man, like, the school pays on all of it, and like, it's like, fancy places, easy to bring to.
Oh, yours is.
So it's sick.
Not ours is good.
That's why, I don't know, it's not too bad, you know, it's actually.
Oh, I'm fucking good.
Normally, because if I was in school specialist, I don't know, it's just, it's fantastic. A lot of it, depends on the sponsors, just, that's how I get all the money, it's through sponsorships. Seconds of. So like, for all of you, it's great. Yeah,
But that's how you look at it. I don't have like.
so they put in money in all sorts of things, so like, you can get more scholarships.
Fourth row. Still set.
I might get paperwork on that. It's gonna have like a caption on his name. No, I saw one that said, it was like a decal that said, my car is louder than your show. It's something like, don't say something about my car because your daughter could be my passenger seat. I get that, that's funny.
Is that one of those little decals you put on the window?
Yeah. The one I have on right now, it says, let me guess, license registration.
Like Dave's really good, it's hard to hold my back.
I had a cop, I was talking with like a red light in Westchester, and he just talked to me, like, I was just asking him how much my car was and everything, and he was like, most cops like get mad at people like that, like cars like this, he was like, honestly, no one would care. He said, he's actually like cars like this, I was like, thanks, I was like, thanks for not pulling me over.
These are like time outside.
I think you had some type of weird, well, not weird, but had some type of paint thing going on, paint job.
Yeah.
I can't remember anything about it. I just remember it was bad. I didn't see it.
I had a draw again, and then we were going through it.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. If I was to choose one though, to go.
Yeah, that's like good.
I was gonna do,
Yeah.
actually.
It's like,
Oh, Coyote. Yeah.
you gotta make sure when
I'll just get a little cheap, his Ford Focus is like 10.
No, no, they're good. They're good driving too. Trust me, driving that here. I was driving that earlier because I already had no tread on my tires.
Oh, yeah?
So I was like, I've done a couple of, I got a couple of brands so that I had no tread, so I was having to get something. It was rainy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was bad. I literally had, I turned my caution lights on down in the car lane. I was like, that's gonna be fun driving home.
Yeah?
It's a little pouring down here.
Yeah, it was still raining when I got here too. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably gonna take me another hour and a half, 2 hours. to get back to Kentucky.
Where you live?
Well, going over to my girlfriend's house again tonight, yeah. She lives in Ellesmere, it's like 10 miles, it's like 10 miles. If that, okay. Yeah. And like, I should take like 10, 11 minutes, but it takes like 40, 50 minutes.
I like it. I like it. I mean, everyone lives there though. It's like a water drive. That's without rain. So they come in hour. I really want to see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. There's always random traffic and always random stuff closed.
And the road going back in that Fairfield, like going back down there, they're so bad.
Really?
Yeah, they're always so bad.
There's a lot of woods in Fairfield, isn't there?
Kinda. And like the city part. I live in like out of the Fairfield.
All right, good people. Good. Here's what I'd like to have you try. Now, you got a reasonable set of plans. You can kind of see yours a little better than I had on that overhead, okay? And you get to be the teacher, or at least the question asker. Okay, you get to be the question asker. Now, the bad part is you got to be the question answerer too. But what I'd like to have you do is come up with, let's say, 2 questions from the building plans, kind of like I was throwing out at you maybe a little bit. But something, you know, and I don't care what page you pick it on, but you got to kind of maybe lead me to it or something like that, or help me to find it, or tell me where I might look, or according to the front elevation, blah, 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 or according to the foundation plan, blah, 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 or what page is the foundation plan on? Questions. Write them down, if you would. And then put the answer down. Try to word it well. Don't just, you know, give it a little bit of thought. Try to word it well. And tomorrow, I'll tell you how good my day school students do. I'll give them those questions. I'll pick 2 or 3 or 4 of them. My day school students.